Hello everyone and welcome back to Backlot Banter. My name is Tucker Hazel and today I'm joined by my co-host who's at least in the top 5 hairiest men I know, Tanner Dykstra, and today we're here to talk about Wolfman, the new adaptation of one of the long-running cinematic horror franchises. And Leigh Whannell has given his shot, as his crack at this iconic character, and we're here to discuss through the lens of Jason Blum and Leigh Whannell. This is Wolfman. Tanner,
the creative minds at work in Wolfman.
Tanner, how did these creative minds and what they cooked up, how did it feel to you?
Bam! Boom! Big ol' Tucker, this is a stinkeroony is what we got on our hands in Wolfman. I was excited for this. I actually thought it would be, at worst, okay. But this film really disappointed me.
Yeah.
Because, you and I are both big fans of Leigh Whannell's Invisible Man from 2020. Mm-hmm. Very good, imagining or reimagining of this classic Universal monster tale. Mm-hmm. And I was hoping for something similar in Wolfman. What I got, though, was something so boring, so unimaginative, so stock standard horror movie that I was aghast at how badly the ball had been dropped on this project. Now, of course, this has been in development for a long time, but at least with that sort of situation, you would hope that, some interesting ideas would bubble to the top. But I would argue that this film kind of has no interesting ideas, but I want to know what you have to say.
No, I agree. I think at best, this is a very mediocre, average horror movie. I think at worst, it has some really lame dialogue. I think it has a group of characters who are only fleshed out in the most bare possible sense, but who also, I think, don't have good chemistry as a family.
Yeah.
Which means that the stakes of this movie are just kind of there by virtue of it's a horror movie. Mm-hmm. And it's also so simple that I was kind of surprised. I think that's the thing that mostly took me aback. By the time this movie was ending, I'm like, oh, that's it? That's all? That's the only idea you have up your sleeve is that this guy turns into a monster? And, I mean, frankly, I think there's a couple of half-assed themes that they try their hand at, setting
we'll get
up.
To it.
But they certainly don't come to fruition by the end of the film. And there really is no extra layer to Wolfman that I think would set up any other better horror movie apart. It's okay, you've got the trappings, you've got the simple concept, but what more are you going to do with that? And this 2025 adaptation of Wolfman has nothing else to call its own.
Yeah. Doug, you brought up the chemistry first here. So I want to start with Mr. Christopher Abbott and Mrs. Julia Garner. Mm-hmm. Two actors who are very talented in their own rights, who I have liked in various TV and film projects in the years past, and who posed an interesting sort of addition to this movie, I guess, when they were first announced as cast members, and in execution are just the most bland, miserable characters you've ever laid your eyes upon.
Yeah.
And not miserable in an interesting way. Miserable in a, do these characters even like each other way? Do they like being with each other? Do they like having a daughter? I mean, these are questions that they ask themselves.
Yeah.
But then in the very next scene, they're having a jolly old family time, driving a moving truck or whatever. Yeah. And we don't interrogate that stuff any further. Yeah. Because when you're getting introduced to them in their home life, the opening scenes of this movie, which I think take way too long.
Oh, sure.
The character setup, especially for what is even hardly paid off at the end of the movie.
Yeah.
You're this is dull and drab and sad. I don't feel a connection between these characters at all.
Yeah. Well, I think for me, the thing that really disappoints me about all that setup is that the movie, I'd say there's easily 25 minutes at the beginning of the movie that includes the family setup information and also a very long opening segment of our main character Blake as a child, which is fine enough, but each of these sections are fine enough, but the things that they establish about the character dynamics get quickly subsumed by an average horror movie, and they're not really revisited by the end of the film. And so even with what is established and these character dynamic elements of especially the Charlotte and Blake, the married couple dynamic, of the fact that they are having a little bit of a rocky moment in their marriage, but it's kind of hard to tell why or how it got to this point, or like what their history was together before that. That he becomes a monster, and so by the end of the movie, it's like, well, I don't. Did they learn anything from this?
I don't think so.
The status quo changed because he's a monster. Like that's the change. Like there's no character growth really.
No, and they try to hint at things. I mean, these ideas are like less than half baked, frankly.
Yeah.
The the turnabout that they try to bring, the resolution that they try to bring to these things are horribly executed upon.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, these ideas of, as he's transforming, he can't understand his wife and child anymore. Can you believe that? Oh, how high-minded of the creators of this film to figure that one out as a metaphor. And then, like, the final shot of this movie and how it mirrors, like, one of the opening shots of the movie, with them, like, looking down the mountain. What does that mean? You can't just have two things that look exactly the same and are framed the exact same way and be like, well, that means something, doesn't it? I would argue that it doesn't.
I agree with you, but I don't think the script agrees with you, because there is this moment in which Blake is inviting Charlotte and his daughter to come with him back to the place in, I think, Oregon, where he grew up, and he's like, there's this valley between two mountains. And I was like, ding, 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 that's a bad line. That doesn't make any sense. But not only that, it's like, it's so beautiful when you look at it, it makes you feel like things are going to be all right. And that's why they have it at the beginning and the end. It's like, to be like, well, okay, so they survived, and they're looking at this, and so because he said that earlier, we know that this is supposed to indicate to at least Charlotte that she feels like things are going to be all right, but like, she's never been here before. She's miles away from civilization with a young girl and her dead husband. Spoilers. It's like, I mean, the script says it's going to be all right, but I see nothing here.
I have no reason to believe that, frankly. Okay, Tucker, let's talk about the horror elements, shall we? We established the character stuff doesn't work, but at least are the scares good? At least in substandard horror movies, you can get the blood pressure up a little bit, you can get the heart rate up a little bit with some scary stuff. Tucker, were you ever scared once in this movie?
Well, there are not a lot of scares in this movie. Like there are like two sequences of action horror tense situation. I think most of this movie, runtime wise, is the dread, I guess, of this transformation and the anxiety of losing someone that you love, and like these things are like implicit in the script. But in terms of it being a horror movie of people running and screaming and fighting back with knives, there are really only two sequences of that. One of which I think is solid enough, which is the part when they crash and the Penske truck or whatever is off a cliff in a tree and like gravity and stuff. I'm like, okay, that's a fine sequence.
Neat sequence.
And whatever like prop set they have of this truck like off a cliff and in a tree, I'm like, that's pretty impressive. That looks cool.
Yeah.
And then there's the end of the movie, which is like the last 20 minutes of the movie. That is them
the
running
barn
around
in the treehouse.
Yeah. And Tanner, the barn in the treehouse, yada yada yada. But also this like greenhouse thing.
Oh,
it's like this like it's like made of plastic. I'm like, why'd you climb up there? Why is it so stupid? It's so dumb.
I hope this wolfman with claws can't get us through the. Oh no, he's slicing through the plastic. No, there is a shot right when they arrive, when they arrive, they like crash and they run onto the property where the rest of the movie will take place, and you get like this shot that has the truck, the barn, the greenhouse, and the house in it, and you come to realize that like, oh, that's all of the settings that we're going to have for the rest of the movie.
Yeah.
Because it is, frankly, so frustrating to me as an audience member to not feel any sense of progression for our characters. Sure. Yeah. They are they're in the house, then they're outside to the truck, then they're back in the house, then they're back outside to the greenhouse, to the barn, and then the treehouse. Like, we are... when we were running back... after the greenhouse, I think, I was like, please, for the love of God, please don't go back in the house. And they went back in the house.
Yeah.
Like, go somewhere else, please. It's not the most logical thing for our characters, but as a filmmaker, progress things a little bit. Give us a change of scenery every once in a while. Because I will also say, these environments, these settings for these sequences to happen are not interesting because I can't fucking see what's going on because this movie is so goddamn dark that you can't see a fucking thing.
It's not only dark, Tanner, but it's like navy blue. Like everything in this movie is dark and blue at the same time, even frankly when it doesn't make any sense that it should be that way. I was especially surprised at how weak the lights are inside this house. There is a moment,
the most dimly lit house ever constructed on the planet.
Well, it's. I mean, who knows the production realities of like how they actually made it look like that? But like in my mind, I'm like, this is a normal house. Like this is a very normal place.
This isn't supposed to be like a spooky house.
No. It's just like a place where a guy lived for 40 years or whatever. And then there's this moment when he goes in the basement and he turns on the generator and boom, boom, boom. Okay, all the lights come on. And I'm like, I still can't see anything.
You can't see a goddamn thing even. At the beginning of the movie when we were doing like the Blake as a child thing and he's sitting down at the table having breakfast, I was like,
a normal house.
This house, turn on some lights in this fucking house, dude.
Sure. Yeah.
And then they do turn on the lights and they there's nothing. I mean, it's so frustrating because you're like, this doesn't feel atmospheric to me. It's frustrating because I can't see what our characters are doing, what rooms they're in, what the layout, what the geography of this house is. So when we're doing like the run around, chasing through hallways, slamming doors, I'm like, where is anybody? I don't know.
I totally agree with that because it also, I think, points back to the progression and the character like mindset of this movie. I think is really weak because I can't understand why they make certain decisions. Like when they first get into this house, which is not like, this isn't like a bunker prepper house. This isn't like this is The Last of Us and we're like running from zombies.
His dad was like a Vietnam vet or something, I guess.
So they get into this house and they're freaking out, and instead of like going to the kitchen or to a bedroom when their child is going to sleep, they put her on the couch and they're like sitting in the hallway. I'm like, this is a normal home. And because there's like barred windows and like locked doors and he puts a bookcase in front of the front door, like this is a very safe place, all things considered. But they treat it like it's this crazy messed up place that like we need like why is your daughter on a couch? There's multiple bedrooms upstairs.
It's normal. It's fairly normal, honestly.
Yeah. And then on top of that, and I think this to me is the biggest issue that I have with the film, is the most interesting idea that this movie has is the sort of The Fly-esque progression of watching Blake transform into the Wolfman. He's infected. His senses are changing. The way that he sees the world is changing, like literally, like as I said, his senses. And obviously his body is changing. His teeth are falling out. His nails are falling out. All this stuff. Yeah. Watching that progress over the course of the movie is the selling point of this film. This isn't he looks up at the moon and hair grows out of his face and he's the Wolfman. This is a painful, scary process. A
slow transformation, and it's meant to mirror like this idea of actually contracting an illness. There's text on screen that's like there's the mythology behind it is that it's like an actual illness that you contract that slowly turns you into this creature.
Yeah, so there is all that, but it is very hard to tell how aware Blake is through any of this. It is up and down if he is losing it and chewing at his arm or able to like understand kind of what his daughter is signaling. We get these shifts to his visual perspective where
his Wolfman vision.
Where things are like inverted kind of and their eyes are like fiery or something. I don't know, it's very weird. But it's hard for me to tell at any point throughout this movie. I can see how visually he's changed, but mentally it's very rocky. Like it's not like a progression, really. It's just like kind of whatever the scene calls for. If he needs to be, his mind is lost and he's animalistic, then he'll be that. If he needs to like rein it back in and like protect his family or like not attack them, then he does that. And so it really is unsatisfying to watch this happen because I think the visual transformation is fine enough, though I'm not particularly pleased by where it ends.
I agree.
The mental transformation, or the like downward slippery slope of like his mind going, I don't think is well portrayed by the script of this film, and it makes it feel like these scenes could really be placed in any order.
Yeah. The transformation itself, the body horror element of this film, is also very weak. I mean, you basically said the extent of things that happen to him. His teeth fall out, his hair falls out, and like some of his like bones rearrange themselves in a very short sequence. Tucker, 15 years ago, we got a little film by Joe Johnston. I think it was called The Wolfman. You know, in the lineage of this film, I would have to assume, where the effects of it are really good. The transformation is famously very good. Tucker, if you wind back, I don't know, 35 years, there's a little movie called An American Werewolf in London, which has the most iconic werewolf transformation scene in all of the genre. And we can't do even like a fraction of that for this movie. This new imagining of the Wolfman mythos. We have to like really, for whatever reason, tie our hands behind our back with both the transformation, the body horror, the physical effects of it. And I will give them credit. It seems that a lot of it is like practical effects. I will give them credit there. The Wolfman design is fucking atrocious. It sucks hard. It is barely a guy that is hairy. He looks like if you dropped a lollipop on the floor at a barber shop. That's the amount of hair that is on him. Okay, actually no, like you dropped a lollipop like under the couch. That's about as much hair. He's got a dust bunny on him of hair, and like his face is a little fucked up. Like he's barely Wolfman. It drove me up a wall that like, especially when his hair is falling out. I'm like, that's not what happens. He gets more hair. Like, why are you having the Wolfman's hair? Why is he getting more bald? I was baffled by the creative decisions here. He's not hairy. His spoilers. We did spoilers already. His dad shows up, and his dad just has like the beard and long hair that I guess he had. Like they don't really grow more hair, and then like the hands are kind of claw-like, but they're mostly standing on all the two legs like a normal guy, and the face is like a little bonier or fucked up, but. The design is just really disappointing. There's nothing scary about it, and you see it straight on quite a bit. Like, if you want to hide him in shadows and make him more mysterious, I get that, but you see it just straight up, and they release photos of him online, like what the design looks like, and people rightfully made fun of it, because it's bad. It's really bad.
Tanner, thank you for going on that tirade, because... It's all true. I mean, the extent to which he transforms over the course of the film is unsatisfying mentally, as I said, but visually, I also think it's underwhelming, because the only interesting part of the design, I think, especially on the werewolf that you find out is his dad, which is like the only twist in the movie, by the way, I just want to talk about. Is like they kind of don't have lips anymore, so it's like exposed, like the teeth are kind of exposed. I'm like, okay, like that's an interesting like makeup effect at least, and like it does give him a little bit more of a like a demented, monstrous look to him. But otherwise, like I was thinking this as I was watching, like, man, this movie really hates like people who are like sweaty and bald. Like
that's all they
and don't
really
have good
are.
Skincare. Like this is it really is just like the progression is. Okay, well, he's sweaty at first, which is, okay, fine enough. But then he's, like, sweaty and lumpy, and then sweaty and lumpy and bald, and then sweaty and lumpy and bald, and his teeth and nails are weird.
He's got claws.
So, yeah, I think that is another element of this movie that is pretty severely lacking, especially because it means that these sequences in which it is either running from the initial Wolfman, or... or seeing Blake as the Wolfman, they're not very scary, because it's like, well, it's just like a really weird guy back there.
Yeah, he doesn't look like a monster That's my thing.
Yeah.
And I understand that Leigh Whannell had great success with this more grounded retelling of the Invisible Man story.
Yeah.
Where he's like, it's not a guy who like drinks a potion or whatever and becomes invisible. He has like a high-tech mirror suit that replicates his surroundings. That's how he's invisible. And that works for that movie.
Totally.
That is similarly a like pulpy, interesting idea. But you can't just apply like, well, how do we ground the Wolfman mythos? We don't want to do any of the silly silver bullet full moon stuff. We make it like a guy who's sick. I'm like, that is less interesting. The Invisible Man difference is at least equally interesting and makes for a fascinating way to, like, the Invisible Man powers can be that at that point like passed around. Different people can put on the suit. The suit can malfunction, etc., etc.
It has commentary on technology and
it makes that movie
surveillance.
more interesting.
There's no commentary of this being a monster here.
You strip all the interesting things about the idea of a werewolf or a wolfman out of this movie and don't replace it with anything.
No, definitely. Yeah, it is disappointing because, again, the lack of commentary means that I don't know what the lore of this movie is. Like, I don't know why this happened. I don't know.
There's none. It's just like a sickness that you can get.
Yeah. And also the timeline of this movie is very weird. Like, he leaves when he's a teenager or whatever because his dad is a military hard ass, which, okay, fine, whatever.
Fair enough.
Now, I do want to get to, like, the one thing that I think is, like, the theme of this movie, which is...
Okay, yes.
Would you believe, Tanner?
Oh,
would you believe?
Let me sit myself down here.
That the monster.
You tell me. Hang on, no, wait, Tucker, no, please, no.
It's a metaphor for generational trauma.
For what? What? No, Tucker.
But
how can we say this movie's bad then? I mean, groundbreaking horror thematics like that, especially in the 2020s.
But let's narrow in to what that means for this film, which is that Blake had a tough childhood because his dad was strict, but he wasn't abusive. That we saw. That we see. And he, but I don't really think it's implied particularly much.
He's just an asshole.
Yeah, he's just an asshole who's like very strict and like has like military regimen for his child, whatever. And the only time that we see him, frankly, the only time we really see them interact, that is like because it's between that and the cut to he's an adult and he's left him. The last thing we see them do together is like he's like, you make sure that you listen to me. Like, I'm here to protect you. Like, and I'm like, I mean, it was a dangerous situation. Like, this is not a ridiculously, like, hard-ass, like, abusive father way to treat your child. Like, he's just being very firm. And so then, that is from the screenplay, that is the extent of which generational trauma we're able to see has been, quote-unquote, passed down to Blake. Yes. And so then
we get the scene of him and his daughter on the street where she, like, hops up on, like, a roadblock, and he's like, you get down!
Yeah. He's like, no, get down. And then he, like, takes a breath and like, I'm sorry I lost my temper. That is as much as we ever see him lose his temper. And I'm like, he's not a bad father either. Like, there's no trauma going on here. He's not abusive to his daughter. Like, he's a very caring person. By all accounts, he like, takes care of his family. Yeah. And I'm like, there's no stakes to this. Like, it's not generational trauma. He's just, like, firm as a father when he needs to be because his daughter did something dangerous that she shouldn't have. And like I don't understand why the like communication element and the generational trauma element is like what they focus in on this movie when they're not willing to push it to his father actually did something bad to him or he actually did something bad to his family that he needs to like sort of grow from.
They're pulling their punches in all these regards. It just makes the movie really uninteresting. What I will say is, we did our whole bit on like generational trauma, the monster in horror movies being a metaphor for trauma or whatever.
Yeah.
And I've long been on the tirade against this, especially in recent years, of this being a constant throughout horror movies that in years past. What I will say is, upon reflection, I'm like, that is the case in like many classic horror movies too. Like The Shining is a very similar situation. One of my favorite horror movies ever. The instigating factor there is like an underlying trauma or abuse happening in the Torrance family. I think the difference with those movies, those classic ones, and the trend now, this decade, is that they feel the need to explain it every single time or make it so glaringly obvious.
Sure.
Like, our characters are going to therapy and they're talking about how their mom or their dad died or whatever. Or the scene in this movie where Christopher Abbott sits his daughter down and he's like, hey, listen, sometimes parents are so protective and don't want their kids to have scars that they don't realize that they're the ones giving them scars themselves. I'm like, gag me with a fucking spoon. I get it.
Yes.
I understand.
That definitely is not a great scene writing-wise, but I also think it doesn't make a lot of sense in the world of this film because not only because, as I established, I don't think the dynamic is such that I feel like she's in any danger from him of being scarred by anything particularly bad parentally. I think even if his dad was abusive, he's done a good job at making sure he doesn't pass that on to his daughter. Yeah. But then also, he's talking about this in a scenario in which he's explaining that the guy that they met earlier probably died. And also they've been chased by a monster and they're in a house she's never been to before and it's dark and they don't know what's going on. It's a high stress situation. I'm like, she's going to be scarred from this. Yeah. And it's not your fault.
No.
You didn't mean for this to happen. She's going to be scarred because she's being chased around by a monster and she's in a scary house and so she saw someone die. That has nothing to do with you being a bad father. It has nothing to do with the abuse or trauma or like parental situations. Like, you're doing a great job throughout this whole situation.
Considered,
like, he is a very good father. And I think that is the one element of the character dynamic in this film that I do think works is I think he and his daughter have a decent dynamic between the two of them. It's interesting to see a horror character father be like very caring, very focused on his family. I don't think that the dynamic between the married couple works particularly well. Yeah. But I just it was disappointing to see like you had to shove in this extra element there when really the rest of the script does not really support that being a part of it.
It does not. There's a Saw reference in this movie.
Yay!
He chews his leg off in a bear trap.
Yeah.
Because Leigh Whannell, he was in Saw.
Yeah.
He's one of the original guys on Saw.
That's a good point.
How's that? Tucker, 2 out of 10.
Yeah, I think I'll be a little bit more generous and say a 3 out of 10.
Fair.
I don't know. Yeah, well, here's the last thing that I'll say. I do think that Christopher Abbott does the best with what he's given here. I think that it's actually very interesting. As I was watching this, I'm like, he is really well cast as like the next in the lineage of Lon Chaney Jr. as a guy that visually is like kind of boyish, and he has these big puppy dog brown eyes that are very dark, and he has like very like soft features, all things considered. I'm like, and watching him go through this, like visually, he changes a lot, and it's like, okay, I understand why you cast this guy.
He's usually a compelling screen presence.
Yeah,
you know.
But the script does him no benefit here,
justice or favors
And then by the end of the movie just ends because the thing died. And then
they shoot him. They put him out of his misery because his daughter can read his mind actually, which is something that's in this, I guess.
Man. Who knows?
And then they shoot him in the head.
Well,
so
we watched the Wolfman.
Bad movie.
Yeah. Or just Wolfman, I guess. And it's got a lot of issues. It's certainly not going to be a classic. And I don't know. It would be really interesting to see if Blumhouse and Leigh Whannell they do another crack at another horror monster movie. But you know,
I think they might. I think they might go to somebody else. But we'll see. We'll see.
Thank you very much, everyone, for watching this review of Wolfman. Very ranty review of Wolfman.
Yes.
Probably the most impassioned review of Wolfman on the internet, I would have to gather. But thank you very much. We'll see you guys next time.